Welcome back to Study Through the Bible, the YouTube channel where we study the Bible in community here on YouTube, and we do that in 3 simple steps. The first is through the description down below where you can find daily assignments to help you to study the Bible and understand what you are reading and studying. The second are these weekly videos where I share my insights and comments into the passage that we've been studying the week before. And step 3 is where you share your insights, questions, and comments and what God is doing in your life in the comments down below. If all that sounds good, click the subscribe button and enable notifications. Click that like button, share this with others in your life who want to study the Bible and don't have the resources or the community to do that in. And so let's go ahead and jump in. Today we are going to be in 2 Samuel 23 and 24 as well as 1 Chronicles 22 through 29. We are kind of wrapping up this whole section of 1 and 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles. And then we are going to be going very soon to 1 Kings, 1 and 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. And today we're going to be talking about legacy. Okay, because we are ending nearing the end of David's life. We're going to be touching on some of his last words and passing of the torch to Solomon. And so let's go ahead and jump in. 2 Samuel 23:1. These are the last words of David, the inspired utterance of David, son of Jesse, the utterance of the man exalted by the Most High, the man anointed by the God of Jacob, the hero of Israel's songs. The Spirit of the Lord spoke through me. His word was on my tongue. That is like if I were to ask you, what do you want on your tombstone? And please don't say pepperoni and sausage. What would you say? And I know it's kind of a figure of speech because, a tombstone is pretty generic. It has your name, date of birth, date of death, and, maybe a little thing there, loving father, loving husband, all that kind of stuff. What I mean by that is, really, what do you want said in your eulogy? What do you want people when they're getting up and remembering you and they're sharing that with others? What do you want them to talk about? What kind of stories do you want them to share? And this is a very important question. Here's what it says about David. The last words of David. Okay, so it's going to go on to his last words. But the inspired utterance of David, son of Jesse. The utterance of the man exalted by the Most High. So the inspired utterance. This is proof that David's words, David was a prophet. He was not just a poet and musician, but he was a prophet. That his words that were recorded in Scripture are inspired. This is one of the very few passages where it's pinned down to a very specific biblical author with the word inspired next to it. And so that's an affirmation of David's call as a prophet, not just as king, but as prophet. Again, a type of Christ in that way. He's a king and a prophet. And in one, moment, I believe he served as a priest. And so you kind of get that trifecta thing that's only true of Jesus, right? Prophet, priest, and king. The inspired utterance of David, son of Jesse, the utterance of the man exalted by the Most High. And that's the story we've been reading, is the story of a shepherd boy who wasn't even thought about by his father when Samuel the prophet came to anoint the next king after Saul. And God says, where's the youngest? And, he's out with the sheep. Bring him here. He's the guy. He's the guy, because God looks on the inside and man looks on the outside. And we saw how Samuel anointed him. He's anointed by God. And then how God sends him with lunch for his brothers to a battlefield, and where he was, he encounters a giant named Goliath, and he slays the giant on behalf of Israel. He wasn't even enlisted in the army. And then he goes on to slay his tens of thousands, and the people start rallying to his side. And you see the victory, and he brings the Ark of the Covenant back to Israel. Okay, so he's a man exalted by the Most High, the man anointed by the God of Jacob, the hero of Israel's songs. The Spirit of the Lord spoke through me. His word was on my tongue. And so his words became basically the hymnal. I mean, he was like the Chris Tomlin of his day. Um, and so that's the legacy that David leaves. I mean, every king from this point is going to be measured. If they're a good king, they're going to be measured to David, and if they're a bad king, then they're going to be measured by another king that's hasn't even come yet. But that's who David was, and that's how he was remembered, and that's how most of us, knew David before we got really in depth in going through these books, and we've seen some of the messy stuff in his life. And it's not done before we get through with 2 Samuel. David's going to mess up again, but this is what essentially he has at his tombstone, what is said in his funeral. And if you think about what that is in your life, then you can reverse engineer back. You can think about, like, this is what I want out here. This is what I want people to be saying. This is what I want to leave behind. And then what does it take to get there? And backtrack that all the way back to like today. When you wake up in the morning, what gets you up in the morning? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do that's going to move you one step closer to what you want to be the end game? And that is the way that you should live. And that is a way in which David was imperfect, but in a sense, he had this relationship with God, and he was able to accomplish some pretty great things. So 2 Samuel 23:3, the God of Israel spoke. The rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over the people in righteousness, when he rules in the fear of God. This is a king who is held up to the highest standard in terms of, a king after God's own heart, a man after God's own heart, and he is issuing a decree, something to hold Israel accountable, all kings being held accountable, that the rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over people in righteousness, when he rules in the fear of God. And that's what a lot of Christians just desperately long for. We long for, but we don't live in America in a theocracy. What's close to it, a monarchy would be like England and some other places. They have dictators. Some have, we have this republic, that, or some refer to it as democracy or whatever it is. And that's what a lot of Christians, long for. Somebody who is a godly leader, somebody who would lead the people in godly ways. But our picture of that is oftentimes that, they're just mandating religion, mandating Christianity, mandating morals upon the people. And, we're going to teach them all those things, and we're going to mandate that this is the way that you live. And that's not the way that God does it. God is sovereign, but he allows freedom for people to be able to receive him or reject him, to choose his ways or to not reject his ways. But David can say, when a ruler deals in righteousness and in the fear of God, that they are on the right track. And that's how David wanted to, that's how he ruled the people. That's how he strove to rule the people, to be on their side and representing them to God, representing God to them. That's how David wanted to rule. So 2 Samuel 23:5, if my house were not right with God, surely he would not have made with me an everlasting covenant, arranged and secured in every part. Surely he would not bring to fruition my salvation and grant me my every desire. But who am I, and who are my people, that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have given you only that which comes from your hand. We are foreigners and strangers in your sight, as were all our ancestors. Our days on earth are like a shadow, without hope. I didn't realize when I actually put the NIV text here, I usually start with King James, and when I put the NIV, just so it's a little bit more readable, I did not realize until today in a Bible study that I was leading that the NIV and the New Living Translations, when you go back to the previous screen and the previous verse, they represent it as David saying something that's completely opposite of what it actually says. They say, they represent David as saying, if God were not, if my family was not right with God, then God wouldn't have made a promise to my family. Now, I want you to think about all of the passages that we've been looking at over the last few weeks, all of the things that have happened in David's family. And think back to when Bathsheba, the whole incident went down, Bathsheba and Uriah, how Nathan says to David that because of this, the sword will never depart from your household. And then we saw how Amnon, took advantage of Tamar, and then Absalom kills Amnon. And then Absalom tries to steal the kingdom away from David, and then David's men kill Absalom. And, you gotta, I don't know what was going through their mind when they saw this. And then 1 Chronicles 29:14, but who am I? And who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. There's, a kind of infamous verse in one of the other scriptures that are out there that says that we are saved by grace after all that we can do. And there's some within that movement, if you know what I'm talking about, that they want to change that change the meaning to say, in spite of all that we can do. That it's, God saves us by grace in spite of everything that we can do. And if only it said that, but it doesn't say that, because what they are saying is more the biblical message, in spite of all that we can do. David is saying, my house is a mess. My family is a mess. There's blood spilled everywhere at my hands and my son's hands, and we've left the kingdom just kind of teetering on the brink of civil war constantly, even though it's, it's so-called the United Kingdom starting under David and Solomon. But he's left things in a mess. And so I read David saying, God, in spite of everything that I've done, you love me. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. While we were helpless, while we were in rebellion against God, Jesus died for us. We are saved by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. That is the biblical message. That we give an effort, but our effort isn't going to earn us or accomplish us anything. Jesus said, apart from me, you can do nothing. But Paul says that through Christ, I can do all things. Jesus says, with God, nothing is impossible. And we need to understand that paradox. We need to understand that, as Paul says, in my weakness, he is strong. When I am humbled, when I am weak, when I am down, then he is lifted up, and he shows himself strong on my behalf. And in no greater way than our salvation, our very salvation. 2 Samuel 23:15, David longed for water and said, oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem. So the three mighty warriors broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. This is what you would call a drink offering, okay? And the Apostle Paul does it, and, description of what that entails is in the Old Testament Torah, which those books you can go back our study through Genesis through Deuteronomy, more likely in Exodus, Leviticus, or Deuteronomy. But this whole instruction on the drink offering, and David is at the end of his life, and he's wanting water, but then he, pours it out. He refused to drink it, and so he pours it out as symbolic as I am being poured out before the Lord. Just like Paul says, I am being poured out as a drink offering. And that was when Paul believed very much so that he was going to die, and we get what he believed to be his last words. And many say that Paul went to live on after 2 Timothy was written, but at that time he believed that he was going to go be with Jesus. And so you get his sincere thoughts, like I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, the reward is laid up for me, just like it is for anybody who accepts it by faith, right? And so David is being poured out for the Lord, and that's ultimately what David's getting at. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? Yes, we have goals when it comes to our family, when it comes to work, when it comes to all the education and personal growth and all these kind of things. We want to leave behind things that we've done, accomplished, successes. We want to leave behind all of those things, but at the same time, we want to leave behind, most of all, a legacy of faith. Who did we share the gospel with? Who did we have the privilege of leading into the kingdom, of discipling, of serving, of loving? What kind of legacy have we left when it comes to these things? 2 Samuel 23:8. These are the names of David's mighty warriors. And in verse 39, at the end of this long list of guys that were David's mighty men, the infamous, or the famous, I shouldn't say infamous, the famous mighty men of David, his mighty warriors, the ones that, were so victorious in battle and, have such a reputation. At the end of that list, at the very end of the list, it really struck me that they have listed there Uriah the Hittite. And to my knowledge, I mean, when David was out there in battle, before he decided he was going to stay home and not lead the battle, he may have fought alongside Uriah. But in terms of like the whole venture of like him, running from Saul, and when David actually was out there and fighting the battles and all of the tens of thousands that he's slain, I don't know that Uriah was ever out there by his side. But I think this is symbolic. That it's kind of like Mark in the New Testament, and how he and Paul had this clashing of ideas and butting of heads, and you wonder, they went their two separate ways on the mission field. And then you read in one of Paul's letters, greet Mark for me. He had, by the end of his ministry, he had made amends. He and Mark were co-workers. They were on the same team. They had worked it out. And David didn't have a chance to work it out with Uriah. He had him killed, but he did have a chance to honor him. And so that's what I believe that we're seeing here, is that you have him making it right. And sometimes when we think of legacy, we need to think through what are those negative things that people might remember me by. What are those major mistakes? What are those things I wish I could take back? And a question that we really need to ask is there something that we need to do today? Is there something that we need to do to go make it right? And like I said, he couldn't bring Uriah back from the dead, but he could do something to honor Uriah as one of his mighty men. And that's exactly what ends up happening. At the end of his life and ministry and everything else, David, on the list of those who were fighting by his side, is Uriah the Hittite. And so what are those things that God may be calling you to make it right? Make it right between him, make it right between you and another person, make an action maybe that you did. Is God calling you to take steps to undo it? Something that you don't want to keep with you and stay haunting you, and all of those things. So what is he calling you to make right? 2 Samuel 24:12. Go and tell David, this is what the Lord says. I'm giving you 3 options. Choose one of them for me to carry out against you. So David, at the end of 2 Samuel, which obviously comes before, in chronologically, it comes before David's last words, which were in the previous chapter. It has him commanding that a census be taken, meaning that he wanted all of the soldiers to be counted. And this is one of those confusing passages. And, honestly, I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, why this was wrong. And maybe some of you know, and I would love to hear in the comments down below what you got. But for whatever reason, this was just a symbolic thing that to God says, you're taking matters into your own hands, and you're trusting in your own might, you're trusting in your own power, you're trusting in your own kingdom, and you need to trust in me. And so God chastised him for it, and he comes to David, and this is a relationship. This is the father-son relationship. He says, I'm giving you 3 options. Choose one of them for me to carry out against you. And David chooses famine. And, we can go and wonder, like, why did he choose that? And, why would he choose something that's going to affect so many people along with him, instead of just choosing something that's going to just, be like a consequence that comes on him, on his household, and, that kind of thing. But, this is what a parent does. Honestly, there's been times in which, we've done this. Your kids do something, and you can say, what do you think? What do you think that your punishment should be, your consequence should be? And giving them the freedom to choose and take responsibility for their actions. And that's exactly what God's doing. And, they say that, if you're trying to figure out who did something, that one of the ways that you can do it is you can call people in individually, and you can say, what do you think should happen to the person that did this thing? And if they think like, oh, you should just give him mercy, and you should let him off the hook, and just give him a severe tongue lashing kind of thing, then there's a good chance that that might be the person who did it. But if they say, well, they should get a consequence, and they should get a consequence that's fitting with their action. And in this case, I think it should be this. Then the chances are that that person didn't do it. Unless they're just really that good and that manipulative, and they can throw you off the track like that. But, sometimes kids are good at that kind of stuff. 1 Chronicles 22:8. But this word of the Lord came to me. You have shed much blood and have fought many wars. You are not to build a house for my name, because you have shed much blood on the earth in my sight. But you will have a son who will be a man of peace and rest, and I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side. His name will be Solomon, and I will grant Israel peace and quiet during his reign. He is the one who will build a house for my name. He will be my son, and I will be his father, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever. David also said to Solomon his son, be strong and courageous, and do the work. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord God, my God, is with you. He will not fail you or forsake you until all the work for the service of the temple of the Lord is finished. And so David had a sense that what his role was he was supposed to kind of try and bring all of the chaos of the judges period to a close. That it never fully, it never gelled under Saul as king. And that David sought to bring this stuff back together, and to bring it back together into one. And so Solomon's task was to kind of take that ball and run with it. David wanted to take the tabernacle and make it into the temple. And so David was told by God, no, you're a man of war, you have blood on your hands, I don't want you to do it. And so what David did is he basically funded the entire operation. He provided the wood and everything that they were going to need, and he paid for it and he had it ready, and he hands it over to Solomon and says, "This is yours now, son. You're the one. You're the son that God has chosen to reign in my place after I die." And in fact, and he's kind of like putting it on him even as he's dying and as he's going away. And so you have the passing on of the torch. And one of the greatest ways that you can leave a legacy is by passing on what you have learned. The Apostle Paul says, "What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will also be able to train others." And so Paul was thinking 4 generations down the road. He was thinking about, him. He was thinking about the one he's passing it down to, Timothy, and then he's passing it down to reliable men who are able to teach others. That's 4 generations down the line. And if you can think like that, then you're going to have quite a legacy. Because, think about, if you think about what can I do in my family that is going to help pass the torch on, and then my kids take it and run with it, and then their kids take it and run with it. You may not think like that you have a lot to offer in terms of directly to your children, or directly through your income, or directly through your skills, but you can pass on what you have learned, what you do know, what you have experienced, and you can take responsibility for your mistakes, and you can grow as a person, as an individual, and you can pass those things on, and you can make it a little bit better, and you can get the ball rolling, and then they can take that and they can make it a little bit better, and then they can take that and they can make it a little bit better. And just think about it this way: if you happen to bring 2 people to faith in Christ during the course of your entire life, you do what Paul's talking about. Okay, so you bring those 2 people to Christ. They each bring 2 people to Christ. Then that's 4 people, and then that third generation down the line, then they bring 2 people to Christ. Now that's 8 people that have come into Christ as a direct result of you being faithful just to share the gospel with a couple, right? Now, hopefully, I think we all hope that, and I would say this: if you've never had the joy of being able to help somebody actually receive Jesus and come into faith with him, then I would say that you are grossly missing out. And it's not saying, I'm not saying like you're not making an effort, because maybe you are, but if that's really not on your radar, and that's not even on your consciousness, and like it's not part of who you are in daily life, or you don't know when the last time you shared the gospel, or you don't even know what the gospel is to share it, then I strongly recommend that you take that seriously, and that you make it a priority in your life, and ask God, who are the people in my life that don't know you? Who are the people, my neighbors, my coworkers, my classmates, my friends, my family, my peers, the people I come into contact with on a regular basis, the people from hobbies, or places I frequent all the time. Who are those people that God has placed in your life, and who that don't know him, or that you can pass on something that you have learned to, and just start praying for them. Start looking for ways to engage with them. Start looking for opportunities to invite them, and just see what happens. Who knows? You may end up filling an entire pew, at your church one day, and be able to look down the aisle and go, wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And, that math that we did, you bring 10 people to Christ, and they each bring 10 people to Christ. It's 20, and then Well, that's 30 at that point, and then those, bring 40 more, so that's like 70 people at that point, if that continues down the road. And then it keeps on the ripple effect just keeps on going and going and going. And so, what is God calling you to do to pass on the torch? That could be family, that could be work, that could be in your faith. And what is God calling you to do to pass on the torch? And so, that is how you build a godly legacy. And so, I just want to ask, how is God calling you to build a godly legacy and apply what you learned today? Be the person you want to be remembered. Be humble in light of the grace of God. Be poured out before the Lord. Make the past right, and pass on the torch. And as you see, the saying for the day, be the person your dog thinks you are. And I love that because we have 3 Goldens, and we actually have puppies right now. And so anyway, like I said, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, and click that notifications button, and check down in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts on this passage are, what your questions are, how God's operating and changing you in your life. And I would love to hear from you. And make sure you click that like button and share this with your friends. And do this. Check out the assignments for this next week. And until next time, may God's grace be with you.